Okay, so the reading from Emmett Fox for today is titled Beware the Dog. Or if you're dyslexic, I suppose it would be Beware the God. And here's the quote from Proverbs: He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. And then Fox writes, if, when those around you are talking negatively about something or someone, you chip in with your contribution, you are taking a strange dog by the ears, so look out. If you get emotionally entangled in what is not your affair, through indignation, self-righteousness, hatred, or otherwise, you have seized the dog again, and he will bite. And even to think negatively concerning such matters in the secret chamber of your own heart will bring you proportionate and natural punishment. It is always right to think rightly about any person or situation. And if you do this, many opportunities will come to you to help people practically without any breach of law and without coming near the dangerous dog. The title of the talk today is Making Yourself Prisoner. And I owe the title and this topic to Ellie, because last week when she was talking, she mentioned the risk of keeping yourself prisoner. And that stuck with me. I kept thinking of all the aspects in life where I've witnessed folks locking themselves away from their own good by buying into lies about themselves, about the world, and about the divine. And those of you who know Lift on Therapy, one of the big things we do is identify lies people have bought into, not through their own fault, we're not passing judgment here, that are keeping them from having all the good, all the wondrous life that personally I believe every one of us is entitled to as a child of God, as a piece of God. Recently, and this is a good example, I read an article, a letter that someone wrote to an agony columnist, advice columnist, like different words for the same thing. It was from a woman, and she wrote that although her husband made much more money than she did, he insisted that she pay 50-50 on all their expenses. Plus, he demanded that she pay off all the medical costs for her cancer treatments. Jesus. And he'd go on hobby-related trips 2 weekends a month, wouldn't take her, and he forbade her to take any trip because she didn't deserve to. And the woman's only question was, what can I do to convince my husband to let me take a short trip to visit my parents? Think about that. She had locked herself into a prison by believing the lies that the world had taught her and that her husband had taught her. Now that's on the physical plane. And there were so many lies, if you looked at what she was writing, so many lies that she was accepting as truth. And so she was living a life of unhappiness, feeling unworthy, and all she was hoping for was to convince her husband to open the prison gates for just a day or two. How many of us have bought into things on this life that were lies, that were limiting us, where we were keeping ourselves in our own prison? Now, let's take a look at the spiritual side, because there are so many teachers who talk about our risk of rigidity, of buying into lies. And as I was writing this, I was remembering a man I had a conversation with. Don't know him well. I don't even remember his name now, but the conversation struck me. He's a person who does so much volunteer work in his communities for trying to do good. And I don't remember how we got into the conversation, but he was telling me how he didn't deserve God's love and expected to end up in hell, that he wasn't good enough to get into heaven. Well, first of all, let's acknowledge that I think in this community, we don't think in terms of going to hell, going to heaven, but rather our spiritual walk and what we create in it. But this is what he had come to believe. And it was a rigid belief. I talked a little bit about my difference in understanding about the God, but he wasn't willing to hear it. He had decided, now this is the risk, rigid beliefs. He had decided that he was going to hell, there was no hope for him, and he wasn't going to listen to anything else. Just as the woman in the earlier one wasn't questioning these truths that she had been fed by her husband and who knows who else. Rigidity of thinking. And, we've all been exposed to lies in our lifetime. There was no way, in Lift on Therapy we talk about you learn from the time you're in womb through age 10 who you are and how the world works. And as a young person being taught by these big people, you have to assume what they're telling you is true. And with Lift, we have to erase the lies. But what about people who aren't willing to even consider it? Another example that comes to mind is a fellow Philistine I know who, for the last 10 years, has been slowly descending into more and more physical pain, more and more physical inability to move painlessly and get through life. And over time, he's talked about how much pain he's in and so forth, and I say, well, one of the things I do is maintain a hub of knowledge of people who do alternative medicine, and often it heals where traditional medicine isn't. Oh, no, I'm going to stick with my doctor. I believe my doctor. And he's continuing to go downhill. Again, rigidity. And that is not what the divine is about. As I was writing this, I remembered, I guess it's a very well-known quote from the cartoonist Pogo, or cartoonist Walt Kelly, who did the comic strip Pogo, where Pogo says, in this case looking at a whole pile of trash, "We have met the enemy and it is us." And if we choose rigidity in our thinking, we are our own worst friend. We are our own worst enemy. I came across an article from someone who was struggling with spiritual understandings, relationship to God, and quoting from her, "I don't think I ever felt spiritually safe even before my sister's diagnosis of brain cancer when I was 7. I had a child's understanding of my religion. Believe in God, go to heaven. Don't believe in God, go to hell. It was not safe to engage in the questioning and reframing of that trauma of her illness." And it doesn't have to be that way, but often we don't understand that there is an option. And staying with this particular writer and article, she goes on later, and this is a little out of sequence, but it seems appropriate to include it here. She writes, "Trauma doesn't always break a person's connection to God. For some, it deepens and expands their understanding of their faith." So, moving from the rigidity of only one answer to being flexible enough to find something else. And she refers to the University of Sydney Vice Chancellor Michael Spence, who writes that the loss of his wife to cancer deepened his faith. And after he died, he maintained a list of the ways in which he felt that God was still looking out for him. So his religious worldview didn't shatter. It didn't insist on an evil God or a harsh God. It expanded. He chose to expand his understandings to include his grief and his observations that there was still good happening. So how do we steer clear from imprisoning ourselves, whether we're talking in day-to-day things or whether we're talking in spiritual. Well, there's the story of Jesus and the rich man. Rich man comes to him and says, what do I need to do to join your flock or to join your people? And Jesus says, vernacular here, give away everything that you hold dear. And as Sister Pepper, for those of you who are relatively new to us, she was the founder of our home church. She said, what do you hold most dear? Your most tightly held beliefs. Rigidity. And Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, writes, religion creates a high degree of cognitively rigid people or very hateful, attacking people. He is not a fan of religion, nor am I for that matter, because they like to give you lots of shoulds and oughts. Why he says the rigidity and hateful and attacking of religion is almost the public image of Christianity today, and we certainly see enough of it, don't we? Yet God's goal is exactly the opposite. You know, I'm known for saying, as you've heard me say over time, various times in our conversations, that the divine is amorphous. And anytime we try to define what the divine is or what our relationship is, we're limiting our experience of what we can have. Now, Emmett Fox teaches that rigid thinking, which he defines as negative, limiting, or problem-focused thought patterns, is a destructive mental habit that shapes one reality in a negative way. He emphasizes the transformative power of thought and the necessity of conscious mental discipline to change one's life. Now, Pope Francis had something to say about it too. He noted that there's a contrast between rigidity and the freedom and mercy promoted by faith, not by religion's notes, by faith, noting that the fear of breaking rules can be a root cause of a rigid mindset. And he warns that rigidity is not a gift from God and can be a sign of personal immaturity, insecurity, or an inability to live by the very rules being enforced. So, consequences of rigid thinking. It prevents growth and a true connection and interaction with reality, whether we're talking on this world or the divine. It tends to lead to judgmentalism. It hinders compassion. It can mask deeper issues. I'm reminding of a new client I had who was complaining of anxiety and fear. And the very first healing we did, the gentleman was supposed to remove I'm insufficient with the words I'm sufficient, and he couldn't do it. He was crying too hard. And we had to get all that fear and grief out of him before he could finally write into his software, I am sufficient. And then being rigid stifles the Holy Spirit, because all of us here have had experiences with the divine, and it comes in different ways. And sometimes it comes in nudges, sometimes it comes in words, sometimes it just comes in a feeling to do something. But if we restrict how God's going to talk to us, we're going to miss a lot of that. If I can put it this way, we're going to tend to follow by the wayside of our spiritual path. What's the opposite? When you are allowing yourself to be flexible and open in your thinking, you find freedom, personal freedom, spiritual freedom. It also, I will say, you'll find more responsibility, because now you are trusting yourself to know what is right, what is divine, and to know your connection, to feel your connection with the divine. You'll find yourself feeling more mercy and compassion and understanding and it will be a core part of who you are and how you respond to the divine and to the world here. And you're going to find that your walk through life, your interaction with the world and with the divine, is dynamic rather than static. You can adjust as new information, new experiences come in. Now, that said, Richard Rohr, whom I'm going to emphasize here today, argues for a shift from belief-based religion, which is where you're likely to get the rules, to a practice-based one where contemplative practices loosen your personal need for certainty, and it allows you the comfort and the freedom to embrace the paradox that the divine is. It's not just one thing. The divine is so many things, so many shapes, so many colors. And the more we try to put our hands on it, shape it, mold it, define it, the less we are in touch with the totality, to the extent that we in this body can be in touch with this totality. He says a more authentic faith can handle contradiction. And he also interestingly says that we go through two halves of life. The first half is as we become comfortable building our own self, our own identity here in this earth. And then the second half involves being open and willing to accept the experience of contradictions, the concept of contradictions, and become comfortable with being all that we are within the divine and within this world, even though from moment to moment we may be shifting. We're shapeshifters when we're healthy. Shapeshifters because we're following the Spirit, and the Spirit is everywhere, is all of us. So, in terms of how can we move beyond rigid thoughts, he says, stop following the religious focus on believing that things are right and wrong, true and false. Go in for concrete practices that allow you, if I can put it this way, to be open to merging or allowing yourself to be one with the divine, which is what we already are. And it's our limited perceptions and what we're taught that separate us from that. And he says a mature spiritual life involves holding seemingly contradictory ideas together. And we can only nurture that skill through practice, intellectually. That's just going to get in the way. And it allows, he says, for an authentic faith that is not threatened by complexity or by, well, it wasn't this way last week, or it wasn't this way yesterday. Now, he also says within this growth and to become free of rigidity, we need to also acknowledge where we fall short as people seeking connection with the divine. He calls it embracing our shadow. This is who I am. And speaking as someone who works with couples who are often in difficulty, so often the difficulty comes because they're not letting others know this is who I am. They're putting on a show, they're pretending, or they're defending. No, I didn't do that, I didn't mean that, no, it's all your fault, sort of thing. As opposed to, and I put up, I'm so grateful to Phyllis. I don't hide myself from her, and she accepts me as I am, and I'm so grateful that I have her in my life. But the divine is the same. Just pretending that you're loving when in fact you're filled with anger. I've encountered some people like that. The divine knows the difference. The divine can't help you move forward if you're not willing to accept who you are, and then to decide how to deal with it. And we also need to be able to see ourselves from within, sort of critiquing from within. Rohr calls it being on the edge of inside. So we're not so far in that what we are is it, but we are who we are, and we can also see sort of from the outside what we see that we aren't so happy about. I'm reminded of a man, the story goes a different way, but I'm just thinking one part of it. Didn't know him well, but one day he was talking to me. We were both in the performing arts, and he admitted to me that anytime he went to a booking conference, which is where I'd see him, I didn't see him much elsewise, he would cat around all he could. Didn't hide it from his wife, didn't hide it from anybody. He was Randy. And then he said one day, I was shaving, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't like the man I saw looking back at me. In other words, he was looking at himself from the edge of inside. And he went to his wife and apologized and told her from now on he was going to be the best husband and father he could possibly figure out how to be. Now that is being open, not rigid. It is being willing to self-examine, not judgmentally, but to know where you're falling short of the loving ideal of a loving divine. Where you fall short of being a loving contributor to lifting up this world by one action or another as you walk through this world. So Father Rohr suggests as practices to help let loose of rigid thinking, move yourself toward the flexible, the amorphous, the willing to see beyond corners. Centering prayer, where you use a sacred word sort of as a mantra, such as many Indian practitioners do. And you repeat it as a way of focusing on God's presence and using those words to help you return to it in your contemplation. He is such a fan of, one way or another, meditation, contemplation, quiet, just as the Quakers emphasize quiet, so the divine can connect with you, so you can connect with the divine, so that the divine can work through you without the interference of your intellect, but of your spiritual being. He also recommends welcoming prayers where you practice letting go and forgiveness, forgiveness to others, and letting yourself learn to detach from the constant flow of intellectual thoughts and images. He talks about letting your thoughts float by as if they're boats on a river, and you don't have to jump aboard the thoughts, you just let them move past. And you can say, as you look at this thought or that, I'm not that, I don't need that, it's not me. He also suggests mindful movement, whether it's yoga, tai chi, walking in nature, which we talked about last time, is another way to connect. And journaling as an exercise to help us become more aware of our internal life. And he emphasizes that the goal of these practices is not to achieve a specific outcome. There you're risking being rigid. But letting go so that you can rest in the eternal now, in the divine, now with satisfaction with what is you at this moment and whatever is to come at the next moment. Then, sort of coming to a close, there was a nice piece of writing from Pope Francis about this. He wrote, "Beneath rigidity, there is something hidden about a person's life. Rigidity is not a gift of God. Meekness is, kindness is, benevolence is, forgiveness is. But rigidity is not. Beneath rigidity, there is always something hidden, in many cases a double life, but there's also some sort of disease lingering there. How the rigid suffer when they are sincere and they acknowledge this, they suffer. Because they are unable to feel the freedom that God's children feel, they do not know what it is like to walk in the law of the Lord, and they are not blessed, and they suffer so much." And then to close, a prayer that I've modified from one Pope Francis gave. "Dear God, please deliver me from the trap and curse of rigid thinking in my walk with you and in my walk through this life. Please give me the insight to recognize it whenever it appears, and the insight and courage to change my way, to incorporate the broadness of your love and understanding of all that exists. Thank you for hearing and answering my prayer." And that, my friends, is what I have to say today. Anything anyone wants to contribute? Yes, Ellie.
So many good things in that talk. Where to begin? You were, starting it off with, beware of the dog and, the spiritual side of that. When we buy into the lies. And one of the main things that, we are taught from a young age is not to question anything. It doesn't matter what circle you're in. But in a lot of the religious circles, that is an undercurrent. It's not said, but you can feel it. And I've always been lucky or blessed in the fact my Ema told me at a very young age, question everything. When she passed, I still held that, but I got into the fear of because the way I was raised. But I never lost that. And then, in my later years, I had the opportunity of having someone that was my best friend, bless her memory, that reiterated that, question everything. And then my fiance at the time, now my husband, question everything. And so, over the years, that has always been there. And so when I began to question everything and see the similarities in all the paths, it began to hit me that things are the same. Mantra, words of affirmation, prayers, spells, they're all the same. They all have the core thing. We pray to have a better day. We have a word of affirmation of having, a better day. We set our intentions of having a better day. So it's all the same. And over these last year or 2 years, I've had thoughts, come to me, that I would never question before. It's like, what is that? Where did that come from? What, you know, how do I walk this out now? And slowly those walls have come down that I built, that I imprisoned myself around, um, because of, the way I grew up. And the last thing you said, beneath rigidity, that word rigidity, I can't pronounce it. There's always something hidden. Well, we create those prisons because of a myriad of things. You know, um, they help us to keep safe so we don't have to question. They help us not to be afraid because of whatever that fear is. So when you said, there's always something hidden, well, that fear of being different, that fear of, well, what if we're wrong when we question? Um, those same walls that, protect us are also those same walls that keep people out from helping us. So it truly is a double-edged sword that, that those walls present. Um, when we look at something that we think is new or for the first time, it's actually not new. I mean, a very wise book says there is nothing new under the sun. So it's been written, it's been said, it's been shown before. We're just not in that place to see it yet. I had a friend um, explain that to me one time, and she explained it so well, I've, actually remembered it. She goes, the mind is like a Rolodex. We have so much knowledge there. Um, and sometimes we're like, oh, I know that. We don't know how we know it. We just know it. But then as we study whatever it is, it brings that thought forward more. So literally like a Rolodex. So, one day we're studying spirituality, another day we're studying, how that can make us grow. Another day we're studying the method behind something. Lori Kay brings up meditation all the time. She didn't do it for years because she didn't understand it. And then all of a sudden she understood why and the how behind it. And now she does it every day because she understood what the purpose of it was. That's beautiful. And that's how we walk our lives. Sometimes we don't do something or see something because we don't understand it. But once we see that puzzle piece of how it works, oh wow, that's awesome. I'm going to start applying that. And so that's what your talk kind of connected with. You were saying the opposite, the opposite of um, being
Rigidity.
rigid. Flexible and open into thinking, which brings freedom. We can adjust to new info. The practices to do that. You know, we first have to allow that new information to come in. And that is hard. You were mentioning Lyft. That's what Lyft does. It allows for that new information to come in. Whereas for years, we didn't allow it because it was blocked for whatever reason. So thank you for your talk. Gave me a lot more to think about and confirmed a whole lot of other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned something. The Brothers of Purity has a wonderful motto, which I cannot recreate in the back of my mind right now. I'll find it and put it out in email about the importance of scorning no information. Brothers of Purity was a Muslim sect that wrote the first ever, or attempted to write the first ever world encyclopedia back in the 800, 900 BCE era. So, someone else with a contribution. It doesn't look that. Okay, Sylvie and then Charlotte.
Kind of piggybacking on what Ellie was talking about, that rigid thinking. I think a lot of us have that rigid thinking because the powers that be have used those rules to keep us in line. It's a controlling effect. Wouldn't it be great for them if none of us ever questioned anything? I mean, it's just like I remember myself questioning something about, like, why do we do that, Mom? Or why do we do that, Dad? Or something like that. And if it had anything to do with religion, it's like, how dare you even think that, like how dare, and it's like, oh, um, it's I guess I guess when I'm looking at someone being good, it's it's more of an immaturity of thinking. I guess I'm trying to say an immaturity of thinking for yourself in that sense, like you don't cross that line. But what if you did cross that line and start, why is it why is it this way? Why am I thinking this way? Who said it was like this? Why can't I? Yeah. And that's I always, now that I'm older, I'm like and nobody's talking back to me. It's like that. Um it's it's like a scam. I'm sorry. All right, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're
Uh,
welcome.
yeah, one of my favorite bumper sticker slogans is question authority. Oh, Liz, okay. There you go, Liz. You're unmuted.
Uh, Thank you. Well, I kind of have the opposite thing going on with me a lot, and that's like my negative mind has run too much of my life, especially when I was younger. And I'm grateful that I had parents that corrected that so that I didn't believe it about myself. But many times it was saying you did a terrible job, you did it all wrong, you shouldn't have done it that way. And I had a real bad circular habit of doing that. And I had parents who taught me how not to listen to that and to see, something that I did right or that I thought was right, and not listen to that. Otherwise, I can't even imagine where I would would have been in that between that and the rules that we have.
Hmm.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Charlotte.
I just want to commend all the speakers that had something to say on the lecture of Emmett Fox. Thank you, and the Heavenly Father, thank you for troubles in our ways and being blessed, each and every one of us, through the blood of Jesus Christ.
Okay, thank you. And we thank God for having brought us together today, for having given us wisdom, for having provided that which we need so we can continue on drawing closer and more entwined with the wonderful divine. We thank you for the healings that we're being given, for the abundance that's being shared with us, for the assignments that we are receiving from the divine to help lift up this world and all that is beyond it. We thank the divine for watching us as we depart from here, guiding our feet, holding our hands, guiding our mouths, teaching us, healing us. And we look forward to everyone joining us again next Sunday. Be blessed, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and make the world a better place for your having passed through. Bye-bye for now.